Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with lesson number 9 in our incredible tutorial series where you're going to learn Python or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice strong cup of black coffee. That would be strong black coffee, no sugar, no sweeteners, no creamers, none needed. You guys have got to learn that it is coffee, it is caffeine that fuels the engineering world. You guys on this channel out there, you're like fighter jet aircraft. But your fighter jet isn't going to get off the ground if it doesn't have its jet fuel. Think about it. Okay, and besides your coffee, I also need you to fire up your most excellent Visual Studio Code. And as you're bringing up Visual Studio Code, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your encouragement and your support that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and let's look at what we are going to learn today. And as promised in the most excellent tutorial number 8, we said that today what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to do for loops in Python. Now, those of you who have already taken my Arduino series of tutorials, and I certainly hope you have, you already kind of have an idea of the concept of a for loop. What for you I will be doing is just showing you the syntax that you use in Python to get a for loop. Those of you who have not taken my Arduino lessons, and I think you know who you are, never fear. I will go in and explain how for loops work from scratch. So again, this series of tutorials is for absolute beginners, and the goal is not to leave a man behind or a woman behind for that matter. We don't want to leave anyone behind. But what we're going to learn is we are going to learn how to work with for loops. And at its most simple level, a for loop is a clause that will execute a certain number of times. So you'll have a lump of code that you will step through and execute that same line of code for some specific number of times. And so it'll make a lot more sense watching me do it than having me talk about it. Now, here is a difference between Python and Arduino. And it's between Python, I would say probably most programming languages. Now, if you're used to Arduino, you're not going to like this. This Python thing is, I don't like that. But once you start playing with it, it actually makes a lot of sense, and it really lets you do a lot of pretty amazing things. Now, in the world of Arduino, the way you would do a for loop is you would kind of have a start value, a stop value, and an increment value, a start, stop, and increment, and your little counter will start at the first number and go up through the end number, and it will increment each time by your increment value. It's kind of really great. It's like old school programming for j equal 1 to 10 in increments of 1 go, and then it'll go through that loop. J is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it'll drop out. Okay, that's the way most programming languages work. But actually, Python is kind of different, and let me sort of show you. So we're going to go over to Visual Studio Code, and then we are going to come in here, and we are operating in our Python files, and so I'll come there, and then I will click a new file, and I'll say for in python.py. The .py actually is kind of important, and boom, we got ourselves a fresh new program just ready to be written. And so let's kind of maybe review a little bit. It's a little bit different. We got to go back and think a little bit about lists or arrays, and I think we learned about that in lesson number 1 or lesson number 2. And so I could create an array, and I will call my array fruit, and fruit is equal to, I start the array, or I start the list with brackets, and Visual Studio closes the brackets for me already, so we could have the fruit apple, and then I could put a comma, and then I could have the fruit apple or orange, and then I could have the fruit banana, and then just for our tropical friends we will throw in mango, and we will throw in kiwi. So this is my list of fruits. Okay, now if you remember how this worked is I could just say print, and then I could print fruit, and if I do that, what is it going to do? Do you guys remember? It is going to print the whole list of fruits. Do you see that there? Apple, orange, banana, mango, kiwi. That's what it does. All right, or what I could do is I could print a specific one. So like if I wanted to print apple, I would say that's the first one. So I would print fruit. And in fact, I think this is a list of fruits. I should say fruits, and I should say fruits. And so I could print fruits of 1, and you would probably expect that you would get apple. And when I do this, you find out you would be wrong. You don't get apple, you get orange. And why do you get orange instead of apple when you print fruits of 1? Well, that's because as programmers and as programming languages, you start counting with 0. So this position in the list is the 0 position. This is the 1 position. So if you really wanted to print apple, you would need to print the 0 position in the list. And I know we talked about this before, but you really got to remember this because it's kind of important. So then boom, there is apple. All right, so let's get rid of that nonsense. So you can make arrays or list, and you will see better if I get rid of that. Look at that. You see that a lot better. You can do that using arrays. Now also you could say, this is another kind of thing you got to keep in mind with arrays or lists. So let's say you can go from 1, I want to print all the fruits in the fruits list from position 1 through, let's say, position 4. Now, what would you expect this to print? Well, you would expect it to print, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You would expect it to go from orange through kiwi. And if you expected that, you would in fact be wrong. Why? Because it's just a quirky little thing about Python, and you've got to understand it or you're going to mess up or you're going to get confused and you're going to have trouble really getting it. When you say 1 to 4, that means you go from 1, okay, up to 4, but don't include 4. So it says go from 1, which would be 0, 1, and then you would stop at 1, 2, 3, because 3 is the last one before 4. So when you say you want to go to 4, you got to really go to, you've really got to go one off from that. So I guess if we wanted all of them, will it do this? I am not sure, but let's try that. Okay, yeah, so when I said go from the first position to the 5th position, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop 1 before 5, which would be 4 kiwi, and we've got that. And so I don't want to go into all the reasons. There's actually reasons they did it this way, but just understand that when you say 1 to 5, it means stop before you get to 5, the last one before 5. All right, so I didn't write it. I'm just telling you what it does. All right, so that is that. Now, we have really digressed. We need to get back to for loops, but just needed to kind of review arrays. Okay, and just to also show you, I could also say fruit is equal to, I could say fruit is equal to fruits of 2, and then I could print, and I want to print fruit singular. What is that going to print? Tell me what it's going to print. All right. If you said banana, you would be right because this is the 0 position, the 1 position, and this is the 2 position. And so fruit became fruits of 2, which was banana, and then I printed it. All right. And this is kind of like a standard that a lot of times if you're going to make a list, you'll make it plural, like fruits or grades. And then if you want to go grab one out of the list, you would call that fruit singular or grade singular. Well, now this is where the for loop comes in. The for loop in Python does not think in terms of start number, stop number, and increment. It thinks in terms of a list, and then it steps through the list. And so this is the way it will work. I could say, I can get rid of this nonsense, and then I could say for fruit singular in fruits, and then you start the for loop with a semicolon, a lot like an if statement, and then what am I going to print? Well, if I said print fruits, every time through it would print that whole list. Okay. I don't want to print the whole list. I want to print kind of like what is my index, fruit. So the first time through, fruit is apple. The next time through, fruit is orange. The next time through, fruit is banana, because fruit is stepping through fruits. And so let's see if that works like that. And here we go, and boom, do you see that? Apple, orange, banana, mango, kiwi. Fruit stepped through fruits, and then each time through it printed. Now I also want to show you that how do you end the for loop? Well, you stop indenting. And so you kind of start with the colon, and then after that, everything that is indented is going to be in the for loop. Now, I got to warn you that, you want to do your indentation with a tab. You don't want to do it with like spaces. You want to do it with a tab, because you can get yourself messed up. So that first one is like that. Okay. And then I can come down, and now I want to leave the for loop. And so I can put as many lines of code here as I want, and they will all be in the for loop until you stop indenting. And when you stop indenting, then this would be the first line of code that is not in the for loop. Of course, that's not real code. That is gibberish, but let's just say I can do this, that it's going to print the fruits, and each time through it's going to print one fruit, and then I could just say print, and then I could print that's all, folks, like that. And now let's try that. I like to clear that every time, and so let's come up here. And boom, I've got apple, orange, banana, mango, kiwi. That was done in this loop. And then the first line of code after the loop was this print statement that it's going to print one time because it's not in the for loop, and it is going to print that's all, folks. Now, of course, it would be kind of silly if you're not paying attention and you put that in the for loop. What's it going to do? It's going to print it every time. Apple, that's all, folks. Orange, that's all, folks. Mango, that's all, folks. Kiwi, that's all, folks. But that's a common mistake I see, is putting something in the for loop that should not be in the for loop. Now, you can also put for loops inside of for loops, but if you wanted a for loop inside this other for loop, it has to be indented so it is inside the for loop. And here I could say for, and I could say letter in fruit, right? Letter in fruit, and then I could print letter. Now, what is this going to do? Well, this is going to step through fruits, and so the first fruit would be apple. Now, when you get to this for loop, the first time through the first for loop, fruit is going to be apple, and now it's going to letter. Now, letter isn't a special word. I just could have called it L for L in fruit, and then print L. It is going to what? What do you think this is going to do? Can you predict what this is going to do? Can you predict what this is going to do? Let's try it. Okay, boom, look at this. So it prints apple because the first fruit is apple, and it prints fruit, and then it's going to step through the word fruit, and it's going to step through each letter. Now, again, we don't have to call this letter. We could just call it L. Whatever variable is going to step through fruit, and then print L. Okay, let me kill that, make sure that we actually run it. Okay, now you see the first time through, fruit is apple, it prints fruit, and then it is going to step through, the letter L is going to step through the word fruit one letter at a time, which would be A-P-P-L-E, and then it goes through the main loop a second time, in which case fruit is going to be the next one, which is orange, and then it prints orange, and then it's going to step L through the word orange, and it's going to print each letter at a time, O-R-A-N-G-E. And so this just shows you how you can step through, you can have a loop inside of a loop, and then finally this print, that's all folks, it is not in the main for loop, and it is not in the second for loop, and so therefore it just prints it one time. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is showing that in Python, the for loop, the index, which is our case fruit, steps through the array fruits. Well, what if you just wanted to count to 10? Well, in that case, what we would do is we would have like my numbers, and then we would make an array of numbers. I want to count to 10. And so I am going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we wanted to count to 10. And then now I'm going to say for my number, singular, in my numbers, the array, and then I want to print the my number, because that's going to be stepping through, and then I don't want this other nonsense here, and then it will print that's all folks. And so what should this do? This should count to 10. So let's clear this and let's come up here, and then we are going to count to 10. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then say that's all folks. So you see you're stepping through a list with a for loop in Python. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're old school. You're an old school programmer, and you want to just count. You want for j equal 1 to 10 in steps of 1. You don't want this nonsense, because what if you wanted to go from 1 to 1,000? You would not want to come up here and have to create this array. Well, I have good news for you, is Python has a function that will create the array for you, and that function is called range. Like home on the range, for my number in range, and this range function will generate, it will generate that list for you that it will step through. And just understand, because it's a function, we are using the parentheses, not the square brackets, and we want to start at 1, and we want to count to 10, and we want to go in steps of 1. And so then its range is going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you would think, and then it is going to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you would think, right? And so let's come over here and let's clear all this and let's run this. Boom. Denied. What happened? It went to 9. Because again, it is this crazy characteristic of Python. When you say go from 1 to 10, it stops 1 before 10. And so if you really wanted to go to 10, you've got to tell it 11. So remember, it's from 1 to 11 and stop 1 before you get to 11. Kind of crazy, huh? Kind of crazy, but let's try that. We want to count to 10, so we say start at 1 and then stop 1 before 11 and increment in increments of 1, and we get, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, what if we wanted all the even numbers between 10 and 20? Well, we're going to count in increments of 2. And then where do we want to start? Well, start is easy. We're going to start at 10, and then we want to go through 20, and we want it to include 20, so we'll just say go to 21, and let's see what happens. Boom, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Who's your huckleberry? I'm your huckleberry. All right, it is this increment of 2 that makes that happen. Okay, and so that is starting to give us kind of control over this thing. But always remember, you got to kind of think of this one. So what if I wanted to count backwards from 10? Well, I would start at 10 and I want to go to 0, but really, since I want to go to 0, I'll go to -1, and then I want to take steps of -1. And I'm kind of doing this on the fly, and so I hope this actually works. We're going to clear this, and then we're going to come in and do this, and then let's see. Ooh, look at that. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, why? Because I went 1 past 0. So go to the last number before -1 in your sequence. And so you'll get used to this, but remember it, because if you don't do Python for a while, you can very easily forget that. But we just did a countdown. Okay, so let's kind of get back to more like what we would do traditional, let's say that we would kind of do more like traditional programming. I had to show you all this so that you see how it works and what it can do and all the things that it can do. But now let's get back to kind of what you would normally be doing. And so this is going to be a homework assignment for you. And then I want you to pause the video, and then I will come back. You pause the video and you write this code on your own, and then come back and you can watch me do the coding. But really, guys, you've got to do this on your own. You can't just sit and watch me do it, because the way you learn to code is making mistakes and having to sit through, having to think through it and having to struggle and having to get frustrated and banging your head against the wall, and then you figure it out. And it's just like this epiphany, and you get joy, and then you really learn how to code. If you just sit and type as I type, you are never going to be a coder. Okay, here is your assignment. Prompt the user for the number of grades that he has. Okay, prompt the user for the number of grades he has. Then read those grades in. Okay, one at a time. So if he says he's got 5 grades, then you got to ask him for grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Okay, you got to ask him for 5 grades. Okay, and then what I want you to do is print out the grades, but I want you to do it with for loops. So that would be 2 for loops. The first for loop reads the numbers in, and then the second for loop prints the numbers out. Okay, and so that is what we are going to do. And so I want you to go ahead and pause the video, and then come back after you have figured it out and watch me do it. So 1, 2, 3, pause. Okay. Now, enjoy a little coffee while you were working on that. How many of you were able to do it? If you were able to do it, leave a comment down below. I am legend. If you weren't able to do it, you might just indicate that you folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Okay, so let's see if we can do this. I am going to come here. And what is the first thing that we need? We need to know how many grades the user has. So I'm going to say num grades. Okay, and num grades is you get that. You got to ask the guy how many grades he has. So you say num grades is equal to, it's going to be a number, so you want to float it, and then you want to input it, and you're going to say how many grade. Ooh, I better put that in. That's a prompt. That's a string. Better put it inside the single quotes. So that is going to be how many grades do you have? And then a question mark and a space for nice formatting. Now, what do I want to do? Well, I want to step through a list. So I am going to say for, and I'll use I in range. Okay, so I'm just going to use a simple counter I, which is going to step through the list that is created with range. And I'm going to start with the number 1, and then I'm going to go to num grades, and then I'm going to go in increments of 1, and then we do start a for loop with a colon, and then here we are going to be indented, so this will be inside the for loop, and then I'm going to say grades grade is going to be equal to, I'm going to input, and then I'm going to input, please enter your grade. Okay. And then since that's a number, I sure better float that. And then I got to close the float. So I close the string, I close the input, and then I close the float. So now I'm going to step through and I'm just going to be reading in a grade from him. But the problem is with grade, it is just going to read it and read it and read it. I need to put it into an array. And if I'm going to put it into an array, if you remember from lesson 1 or 2, you've got to create the empty array up here. I'm going to call that grades plural is equal to an empty array. Open bracket, close bracket is a list and there's nothing in it, so it is an empty list. Now each time through I want to read grade, and each time through I want to put grade into grades. And so now I'm going to say grades dot append, right? That's how we add something into grades. What do we want to append? Grade. Okay, so what do I do here? I get the grade from the user, and then I append grade to the empty array grades. Okay, I append grade to the empty array grades. All right. And so let's see what happens here. And now I want to go through and I want to print those. So now I'm going to do it again for I in range, and I'm going to start at 1. Okay. And then I am going to go through num grades times, and then I'm going to increment in increments of 1. And then what is going to happen? I am going to print. And what am I going to print? You got to think about it. I'm going to print grades of I. Okay, so the first time through I is 1, the second time through I is 2, the third time through I is 3. Okay, and so it should print out those grades, right? And so then, just for good measure, after that, I'm going to say print, and I'm going to print that's all, folks. Okay, now you would think this would work, wouldn't you? So let's look at this and say, how many grades do you have? I'll click down here and I'm going to say 3, and then whoa, float cannot be interpreted as an integer. Ah, okay. I remember something now, that this range command wants integers, and numGrades was a float. Okay, because it doesn't want to step through something 3.2 times. It steps through it in integers. And so what we see here is, again, a variable type problem. We need to make that an int because that's the round numbers. That's the counting numbers, and range is a counting function. So we have to make numGrades an int. All right, so let's try this. And so now, how many grades do you have? I have 3. And then please enter your grade. And right off the bat, I see I didn't format it very well, but I'm going to say 90 and then 95. Ooh, index out of range. What happened? What happened? Okay, I want you to go back and think about how we count. I want you to think about how we count in programming languages. Do we start with 1? No, we don't. We start with what? 0. Okay. And then when we print similarly, we need to start at 0. So you see, I was taking that number and I was putting it in the 1 spot where I should have put it in the 0 spot. And so what I will do now is I will go from 0, all right, to numGrades in steps of 1. Now, if I have 3 grades, it's going to be grade 0, grade 1, and then grade 2, okay, which is 3 numbers. But then num grades is 3, so it stops 1 early. Does that make sense? It's 0, 1, 2. That's how many grades. It's 3. But then remember, if num grades is 3, it's going to stop 1 early anyway. And so this is kind of the way they did it. You start counting with 0. You want to go to num grades, but it stops 1 before num grades, which turns out to be the right one. I hope that makes sense. 0, I want 3 grades. 0, 1, 2. That's 3 grades. And that's index 2. Num grades is 3, but it stops at index 2. But if you just always go 0 to num grades, it'll stop 1 before num grades, which is where you wanted it to stop anyway. So let's do this and see if this will work this time. I sure hope it does. Okay, so let's see. All right, we're going to run this baby. How many grades do you have? I have 3 grades, and my first grade, and I forgot to fix that formatting. My first grade is 90. Okay, my second grade is 95, and my third grade is 100, and 90, 95, 100, that's all, folks. Boom. Okay, now let's try to make this a little bit nicer. I should have, on inputting the grades here, I should have put a colon and a space so it'll look a little bit nicer. And then here, before I just print out the numbers, I should give a little prompt, and I should do it outside the for loop and just say print, and then say your grades are, and like that, and then I should print the grades out. And so let's clear this and let's try this again. Okay. So how many grades do you have? I have 3 grades, and I have 90, and I have 95, and I have 100, and then boom, your grades are 90, 95, and 100. Now, where did the grade 90 go? In position 0. Where did the grade 95 go? In position 1. Where did the grade 100 go? In position 2. Now, num grades is 3, but it goes 0, 1, 2. It stops before you get to num grades 3, but it records all 3 numbers. I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't want you to get confused by this, because num grades is 3, but it's not 1, 2, 3. Num grades is 3, and so you go 0 position, 1 position, and then position 2, and that's 1 less than num grades, and you end up at the right spot. So in a crazy roundabout way, since you start counting at 0, you want to stop 1 before num grades, which is how the range function works. Go back and watch this again if it doesn't make sense to you. Okay, watch it again if it doesn't make sense to you. Okay, so some of the things that hopefully you remember, again, guys, you've got to remember what I teach you in earlier lessons, and maybe you couldn't do this homework because you didn't remember how to put numbers in an array. You start with an empty array, and then you append your numbers to that array. You append it. And so at first grades was empty. And in fact, let's just do that. Okay, as we're inputting the numbers here, let's print the entire array of grades. Okay. And you'll see how it's building it up as we do this. That's kind of a neat thing, I think. Let me kill that. Okay, and I come up here. And now, how many grades do you have? We're going to say 3. And then it says, please enter your first grade, and it's 90. And now when I print the list, instead of the list being empty, the list has 1 number in it, and that's 90. Now it wants my next number, 95. Okay, now look at my list. My list is 90, 95. And then it wants my third grade, 100. And then look at that. The array is the list 90, 95, 100. Then we have I that is going to go from 0 to num grades in steps of 1, and it's going to print grades of 0 is 90, you see, which is 90, and then grades of 1, which is 95, and then grades of 2, which is 100. So this is grades of 0, grades of 1, grades of 2, and then you never get to num grade because you stop one before, as you should. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. Hopefully that really makes sense. Okay, I hope you guys are having as much fun taking these lessons as I'm having making them. I'm going to give you a homework now. This one you got to go do on your own, and then I'll show you the solution to the homework next week. Okay, I'll show you the solution to the homework next week, but I really want you to grind this one out. Okay, I want you to ask the user for how many grades he has. I want you to input those into an array, and then I want you to average the grades, and then I want you to print out the average and all the grades. All right, now I'll give you a hint. You already know how to input the grades. I've shown you that here. You already know how to print out the grades. I've shown you that here. But now you are going to need to average the grades. I will give you a hint. There are going to be 3 for loops. The first for loop, you input the grades. The second for loop, you average the grades. And the third for loop, you print the grades out. So you'll say like, your average is 95 and your grades are 90, 95, 100. That's the way it should work. You guys grind this out, man. Pound it out. You're not going to learn to be a coder. You're never going to be a coder if you just sit and watch me do it. Now, what we're going to have is we're going to have 2 groups of people in the world. Those who are legends and those who fold up like cheap lawn chairs. All right. We want you to be a legend. So figure this out. And then if you really get hung, then next week you'll see my solution. Also, even if you get it, you'll sort of see, are you doing it the same way I am? All right, guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. If you guys enjoyed this lesson, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell when you do so you'll get notifications. Think about sharing this with your friend. Again, Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later. That is good.